Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this installment of RackWare Academy. Today's session is an advanced operations and troubleshooting session. Don't worry if you are brand new to RackWare, this will still be well worth your time. While we are waiting for the other participants to join, just a couple items. This session will be recorded. We will send all of you a recording after the fact. The recording includes a transcript, which can come in handy. We'll get that email out to you later today or tomorrow. We do encourage everyone to submit questions during the session today. We have Samir and Colby here today to answer those in real time. You'll be submitting questions by text. So at the bottom of your Zoom window, there's a number of icons. They don't appear until you move your mouse. Zoom has made it a little hard to find the Q&A. On my screen, at least, you have to go to the More icon all the way on the right. Click that, and you'll find a QA icon under More. That's where you will submit your questions by text. Colby and Samir will be doing their best to answer those in real time. If we don't get to it during the session, David will save a few minutes at the end. And if we still can't get to it, we'll get you an answer by email for sure. But it's nice to do those in real time because, if David wants to show you something on screen, we can do that here. So that's it for housekeeping. I will go ahead and introduce David Gioso. He's your instructor today. He's a Chief Solutions Architect here at RackWare. He's been here a very long time. He knows the product very well. Spends a lot of time with customers, both pre and post sales. So you're in good hands. And David, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So yeah, David Gioso, Principal Solutions Architect, Rackware. Yeah, I've been with the company, I think coming up on 13 years. I use the product a lot with a lot of live customers. And I wanted to go ahead and show you some advanced operations that we can do with it. And you're even going to get kind of a sneak peek of our latest GA build that has some really interesting enhancements. So I'm going to use the latest build, which can support all of our workflows from assessment to migration, disaster recovery. And we're going to go from there. So to get started here, we're going to touch on a lot of things. This is not the standard installation and all the basics. This is really getting into the more difficult and complicated pieces of setting up source hosts and everything else that we need to do, and setting up advanced policies and troubleshooting. So if you've been to one of these before, this one's different, and this is going to have a lot of really interesting information for you. So if you have any inquiries, if you just general inquiry, info@rackwareinc.com. If you have specific sales questions, pricing, and things like that, I would send an email to sales@rackwareinc.com. If you're already a customer, you're working with a product, or if it's a POC, I'm sure you're working with somebody already. We do have support at rackwareinc.com. We're going to talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the actual support portal. And again, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A. You'll find that under the More option. That way Samir is online. He can help answer the technical questions. Colby can help answer all the sales related questions. I will try to monitor that and see if I can show you live if you have a question and it relates to what we're doing. The agenda, you already saw that. We're going to go through this pieces. Product overview for those of you that might be a little new, network topology, all these are the basics, but I kind of want to go over those. But we're going to talk about everything from wave planning, storage configuration, command line interface, recovery operations, and support and troubleshooting and what you need to do. So high level, and I'm going to go ahead and drop off of the video so we don't lose any bandwidth here. Get that started real quick. Okay, so at a high level, the RackWare engine itself, we have two products. The RMM, the RackWare Management Module, that's our server-based migration, disaster recovery, and assessment engine. that is designed to work for your typical x86 Windows and Linux virtual machines. So this is to move your workloads from, let's just call it VMware, into OCI or GCP or OLVM, or move them into KVM hypervisor. These are to move those standard x86 virtual machines from one uh, data center to another, or from another cloud to another cloud. And that's what we're going to be using today. We do have another product called Swift. It's a similar workflow, but it's designed for containers. So, hey, if you want to move all those containers off of Tanzu in your on-prem environment, you move them to OKE or to EKS or what have you, this is what you can use, or provide disaster recovery. And I know containers, are easy, modular, but they're not. And unless you really know a lot about containers, we have a product that makes these really simple if you have to manage both environments. And this is what you want to use. We're going to have a follow-up session specific to Swift and containers. I'll do one of those as soon as we get a chance. But the workflows that are supported: cloud migration, moving from one environment to another, VMware to call it OLVM. I'm going to use that today because it's in-house. And question there, can we get the deck I'm looking at? Yes, thank you for reminding me. I'm actually going to give everybody a link right now to everything we're going to be using. So let me get that real quick. That was a good question there. Let me grab this link. I'm going to put this link in the chat, and everything you see me use today, you will actually have access to. Let's see if I get the chat window, and hopefully this will go out to everyone. All right, so I just put a link in the chat for all of you that are here now. This is where the deck is. This is where the WAV files we're going to be using. This is some of the other information. As a matter of fact, very specifically, you'll have access to the deck, the discovery wave that we're going to be using, the deployment and planning guide, and then a headers file, which I don't think is anywhere else. So this is going to be very helpful when we start talking about advanced wave planning and headers. Okay, thanks for putting that in the chat there, or Q&A. So we can do cloud migration, we can do assessment, and we can do converged disaster recovery and backup, all with the RackWare product. It's all just dependent upon the licensing. If you only want migration, you just get the migration licenses and you only pay for migrating your workloads. If you want disaster recovery and backup, it's a different license. It opens up additional features that will support both the migration aspects and then the disaster recovery and backup policies and storage engines and things like that. And assessment right now, that's actually a freemium. So you can get as many assessment licenses as you want. I'll show you what this looks like simply by reaching out to sales@rackwareinc.com. So you can deploy this RackWare engine just like I have, and you can run assessment on any set of source workloads, and you're going to see exactly what that looks like. All right, so what do we support? High level, all your major hyperscalers: Oracle, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, IBM, Huawei, Alibaba. So all your hyperscalers are supported, same workflow. The emerging clouds, OpenStack, Oracle Private Cloud Appliance, PCA, Zadara, and quite a few others, as you can see here. And the virtualization technologies, hypervisors, and things like that. So KVM, ESX, VMware, of course, vCenter, all that, Hyper-V, and even Zen. I don't see that very often anymore. OVM out there for sure. And then your containerized environments, again, for that Swift product is EKS, GKE, the Tanzu, OpenShift. So everything you would expect there. And then the RackWare engine itself, when it does these migrations, these workloads, this is based off of the operating system. So we look at, what is the operating system? As long as that's in the support matrix. This is just a slide. I'm going to show you where to find it in the deployment and prerequisite guide, where it has the actual list. But everything you're really going to see out there is supported. Windows 7, Windows 10. Windows 2008 R2 is still supported, and then Red Hat, Oracle, all the way back to version 5, and then your SUSEs and your CentOSs, your Ubuntu's, things like that. But I'll give you the direct list. That Swift product for containers, again, we got Docker, OpenShift, all the particular clouds, EKS, OKE, GKE, things like that. So if you need to move everything off of Tanzu, don't want to pay those VMware licenses, and you want to move them somewhere else, whether it's another on-prem environment or in the cloud, Swift will do it for you very quickly, or provide you disaster recovery capabilities. Okay, almost done here, but high level, how does RackWare work? What's the architecture look like? There is this RackWare engine, the RMM. It's a virtual machine, and it is running the RackWare software or application. It requires layer 3 network connectivity from itself to the source workloads directly. So all the Windows and Linux machines directly to each of the IP addresses. We require the ability to connect into them on TCP port 22 to each of the individual workloads. We do not have to talk to vCenter, though we can talk to vCenter, and some of these processes become automated if we do, but we don't have to. And leads to, we're not copying VMDKs. Show you more of the architecture in a little bit. And then we need connectivity to the target subnets on port 22. And for Windows, we also need port 445. There are times when we don't need 445, but that's another discussion for later. So you can just say these 2 ports, that's all we really need in order to be able to perform everything I'm going to show you today. Port 22 and 445. You will connect into the RackWare engine on port 22. You're going to SSH into that Linux operating system for the command line, and you're going to connect into the UI on 443 HTTPS so we can run through the GUI. If we're deploying to a target hypervisor or hyperscaler, we do need connectivity or allowed access to the APIs of that hyperscaler or hypervisor. So we just need to be able to connect to the OLVM engine to be able to deploy resources or connect into OCI's API or GCP's, what have you. We've got to be able to, create virtual machines, attach networks, and things like that. We do have the ability to keep the same IP addresses on both sides. I think I'm going to have a separate 1-hour session just for that. But by default, we will change the IPs. We put it on a different subnet or the same subnet with a different IP address. That's just fine because everything has to be live at layer 3. But if you want to keep the same IPs, you're doing a migration, you want to keep the same subnets, and you want to do everything live, we can do this with what's called a bridge server, where we will NAT a network in front of the source network, and we'll drive everything through a GRE or a FU over UDP tunnel to do that. But if you need help with that, just reach out to info. We can do that there. All right, so cool. Okay, let's get started. Let's jump in there. So we will install the RackWare engine, and we've got to do a couple things here. So let me go ahead. Let's get our engine online. All right, here we go. Perfect. Okay, hopefully you can see all these. Okay, so what I've done, let me get logged in real quick. I created everything in VMware. We're just gonna, hey, we're gonna do a VMware exit or a DR. It doesn't really matter. Again, the source environment can be anywhere. It can be Amazon, VMware, can be GCP, OCI. It can be a combination of all those. It can be Nutanix. Doesn't really matter. We've just got some virtual machines that are running. And what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've deployed my RackWare engine. Again, it's just a virtual machine. I think this one's built off Rocky Linux 8 as a base operating system. Only Rocky, Red Hat, or Oracle Linux 8 are the supported OSs to build the RackWare engine. Once I've deployed the OS and installed the RackWare software, I would have added licenses. And then after I add licenses, I will go ahead and I will set my admin password, and I will generate a set of SSH keys. And this is crucial. It's all part of the setup. We're not really going through setup right now. So let me show you what that looks like. All right, let's grab our RackWare engine right now. All right, make it a little bit bigger for you. There we go. Okay, so the RackWare engine is just a Linux machine. And so I've gone ahead and I've set my admin password. There's just an admin user. So if I wanted to reset that, I would just go ahead and do PASSWD admin. That's just a standard Linux user on the OS, and that's what we're going to use for the actual login to the GUI. If you ever forget the password, you just log in, elevate yourself to root, and you can change the password. You'll also go ahead and generate a set of SSH keys. Now, I've done that, so we didn't have to take the time to regenerate that. But if we go here, cd root.ssh, I've got my private key and my public key, and they're backed up, and my authorized keys and my known hosts and things like that. That's because you'll do everything as root whenever you're logged into the RackWare engine directly via SSH. You'll immediately elevate yourself to root, and you'll do everything as root. You're not going to use that admin account or anything like that. You'll always be root, and you'll be able to run all the commands, look at all the files and everything like that. So one thing we will do, we will look at our public key because we're going to use this pretty soon. So we'll just kind of keep that there for now. This is the key that I'm going to use in order to set up the connectivity to my hosts. And let's see what we've got here. Okay, so one of the documents you'll want to look at is the Planning and Deployment and Prerequisite Guide. On the Planning, Deployment, and Prerequisite Guide, let me bring it over here. This is what we were looking at. It has a lot of information. More information than you probably need to see. There we go. What you want to do is we'll just take a look at the table of contents here, but it's got how to create the SSH keys. It talks about installing the RackWare engine and that admin user. So I kind of summed all that up real quick here. You do this set up the admin user. It talks into the prereqs of what it needs for installing the RackWare engine. We're not going to get into that, but there's some information here that it needs. I'm going to show you in more detail what that looks like. But it also talks about the prerequisites here for Linux machines. We're going to go into all these, kind of lays them all out for you, and the prereqs for the Windows machines also. Goes over the network topology, so kind of a lot of things I just went over real quick. It's going to go over that. And then you'll also find information on supported OSs, so Rocky Linux 8, Oracle Linux 8 as the installation OS. But really, what you're going to look at here, we go down to the section where it has supported target environments for auto provisioning. So auto provisioning is key if you want RackWare to do everything for you. And provision all of the targets, hosts, and hardware. Then these are what are supported right now. I don't even know yet. vCenter, of course, OLVM is supported, Huawei Cloud, KVM, everything you're going to find out there. Then the supported operating systems. So this is what you want to look at. So here's all the actual supported operating systems. What is supported for RackWare to perform a migration? It looks at the base OS, and as long as that OS is in the support matrix, then it can migrate it or protect it. Okay, and file systems. File systems are very important because we have to be able to read the files in order to clone these files. If you are using RackWare for disaster recovery, you're going to need or want LVM volumes, and you're going to want free extents. We actually have some pretty nifty tricks to cloning source hosts and rebuilding them with LVM volumes. It'll be a discussion for later, but I'm going to show you what all this looks like for setting up for disaster recovery, kind of the gotchas that may not really be here. So we got our ports and everything like that, but let's just go straight down to setting up our Linux host. All right, so I've deployed my RackWare engine. I've licensed my RackWare engine, and I've logged in with the UI. So we'll go ahead and just refresh, and I've got my RackWare engine deployed. It happens to be deployed in the on-prem environment right now, the VMware. I'm going to log in with that admin user and the password I set. All right, so I've deployed this RackWare engine. I've licensed it already. So I can go here to the RMM info and I can see that I have my RackWare engine. It's actually licensed for everything, of course. And it tells me how many licenses do I have. So I had 500. Out of the 500, I have 495 left that I can still use. And so just the basic information here, it'll tell us. And so after you deploy the RackWare engine, it will generate a pre-install file. With the pre-install file, you send that to your contact. They can get you POC or demo licenses so you can actually deploy this in your own environment and play around with it for a little while. But the license doesn't get generated until after you have created a RackWare engine to start out with. So we'll go ahead after I've created and licensed my RackWare engine. I need to set up my SSH keys with my source hosts. So this is where we start to say, okay, I'm going to set up a Linux machine, and here are some of the key operations I need to perform. So first, I've got to set up my user and my SSH key. And then after I do that, I want to take a look at free extents relating to LVM volumes, whitelisting my antivirus if I'm running it, and no exec on temp or var temp. These are kind of the big gotchas. These are the things that we need to think about with each of the Linux machines. So let's go ahead and just do that real quick. Let's take a look at our document on setting up a Linux machine, because this is what you can look at. And it literally says here, okay, we're going to do, first thing we want to do is I'm going to create a RackWare user. So let's go ahead and let's find our source Linux machine. I built one right now. Okay. All right. So right now we don't have any users other than the initial root user on this Rocky Linux 8 machine. So let's just see what we're supposed to do. Let's go ahead and just make it a little bit bigger for you. All right. There we go. Okay. So what does this say? Go back to the document. It says, all right, first thing I want to do is I'm going to add this RackWare user. So let's just copy and paste. Say we'll create a RackWare user. Okay. And then it says, look at the RackWare engine and copy this sudoers config information. Okay, so we'll just copy this. Come back over here to my RackWare engine. And we'll just paste this. Say, okay, well, what is this? All right, so this is sudoers config file. This sudoers config file basically says this RackWare user is allowed to run as root and require TTY. So we're going to create this RackWare user. That's what RackWare is going to use to perform migrations or disaster recovery, and allow it to run, execute commands remotely. Okay, so we catted that. It says go back to the source host and just run vi sudo. I'm just going to cut and paste here. All right, so go here. There's our source host, vi sudo. Okay, I'm going to do Shift G to go to the very bottom, and I'm just going to hit O to open. I'm going to come back here, and I'm just going to copy this and paste it. All right, there we go. So I pasted this into my sudoers config using vi sudo. RackWare user that we created can run as root, require TTY. Okay, so we'll save that. All right. Sorry for a second. No, we're good. Cool. All right. Then what we want to do is we want to go ahead and we want to create the SSH directory and add the authorized key file for this RackWare user. So we have the user, but we don't have anything like that. So on our source host, we're going to do su to RackWare. Okay. Then copy and paste these commands. You don't have to think of anything here. This can be scripted too. If you have 1,000 machines, we have scripts and professional services that can do all this for you, or you can do it through LDAP, whatever you want. This is the manual steps. but this can be fully automated. So we can tell it to make the directory for .ssh, and we'll go ahead and create our authorized key file. All right. Okay, we're almost done. One more. Okay, so then it says, all right, copy the SSH key from the RackWare engine. All right, so that's what we were looking at before. So remember, we'll just grab this and cat that, go back to our RackWare engine, cat that file. Okay, and we're going to paste the contents into this home authorized key file on our source machine here. So great. So we want to just do a VI, and we can even just copy this or whatever text editor you want. Insert, come back over here, grab our key. And save. All right, let's take a quick look. Sorry. RackWare.ssh. Okay, and so we have authorized key file. Cat that real quick, make sure we actually pasted it in there. There we go. Okay, so we've done that. We've created the RackWare user, we set up the sudoers config, and we went ahead and added the public SSH key from the RackWare engine to our source host. And we did that. I've done that for our other Linux hosts that we're going to use here. So this is what we do for Linux. And then it says, hey, let's make sure this works. Let's connect in from the RackWare engine. We should be able to connect in, not be prompted for a password. We want a passwordless SSH connection. So, hey, what's the IP address of this guy? I don't know. 172. Great. So we'll see if this worked. Come back to our RackWare engine. We're going to SSH as the RackWare user to the IP address. Oh, so yes. And there we go. So we are logged into our source host as the RackWare user, and we're allowed to run sudo commands. So there we go. So this is our source host. We're now logged in. We're able to run commands on that. That's how you test the connectivity to the Linux source machine. So we'll exit out of that. That all looks very good. We set up the user and everything else. So this goes through some of that information, and then we start getting into some of the other pieces. I'm going to show you advanced storage configuration. We're going to be doing disaster recovery, but the same applies to migration in a sense that if you have LVM volumes on your source hosts, we want you to have free extents so that we can take an LVM snapshot and make sure that we can not try and copy any files that are live or open because we copy from the snapshot instead of the data directly. That's what you want to do. For Windows, it's similar, but it's using VSS shadow copy snapshots, which is always built in. So you don't really have to think about free extents. You just have to make sure the drives have enough space for them. So let's look at this one here. So this says free extents, talks about free extents and some other things here. So let's look at my notes real quick. So what do we got to do? If we want to see if we have free extents, the command is vg display. Okay, so we're in our source host. Okay, and on our source host, sorry, hold on a second here. There we go. Don't know why we're there. We were still sudoed as our RackWare user. Okay, VG display. Okay, VG display, one volume group called RL, and it has no free extents. So all the disk was used up for the volume. We don't have any free extents. How can I do this? I want to protect this. I want to do it correctly, or I'm going to migrate this with a running application, a database, or something like that. Got to have some free extents on there. Super simple. So let's go ahead and The other things we're going to talk about, we're going to circle back to are the antivirus whitelisting. But let's see what can we do to add free extents. So let's take a quick look at our disk. Let's be okay. Okay, so we have dev SDA, and we have our partitions on dev SDA for root or swap, everything like that. Okay, so what we can do is we can go ahead and add a new disk very easily. So if I come back over here, and this is the host right there, we'll go ahead and we'll just do a quick edit. We'll add a disk. All right, add a new device, hard disk. We'll just give this thing like 5 gigs. And you can do this, of course, in any way you want. It doesn't really matter. Extend provision. You can also just increase the disk size and use fdisk and give that partition over. This just makes it a little bit more clear. So I could increase the disk. I could then format that additional space and use it as a partition, or I can just add a disk real quickly and use this new disk for my free extents. So let's see here. Let's see if that shows up. Cool, dev SDB. So here's our new disk that we just added. So now we have these 5 gigs. So we don't need that much. You only need 10 or 15%. So we only really need like 3 gigs total. But we can use this disk and we can add it to our LVM volume for free extents. So a couple simple commands. So it is dev SDB. So sudo pv create dev SDB. Okay, great. What else we got to do? We know our volume group. We'll grab it right there. We'll just do it again. Our volume group is RL. So all we can do is we can just do a VG extend. Perfect. And then VG display. And there we go. There's our free extents. So you can imagine I didn't have to use another disk. I could have used a partition. I could have used, I could have added additional space and created dev SDA3, and I could have given dev SDA3 over with the VG extend command. So however you want to do this, larger disk or just adding another disk, super simple. This is how we get some free extents. And that's what you really want to make sure you have, especially if you're doing disaster recovery, because that allows us to take an LVM snapshot of the logical volume. Therefore, we're not trying to copy any live files or open files, copying everything from the snapshot itself. Okay, so that's your free extents talks about. The other thing we talk about is antivirus. So if you are running antivirus on Linux, we do want you to whitelist the mount RackWare directory. So there's lots of different antiviruses. I'm not going to go through any of them because they're all different, but really whatever it takes to just whitelist mount RackWare so that the antivirus doesn't see RackWare's operations and copying of files as an intrusion, because it's going to read every single file. We can't copy the files if we can't read the files. Remember, we're doing everything at the OS level. We're not trying to copy the VMDK. This is very different than a lot of other tools. So it gives us a lot more flexibility. So just make sure you whitelist the mount RackWare if you're running some sort of antivirus on there. And then another gotcha I see is in a lot of very secure federal environments, no exec is set on temp or var temp. So we do need, if we, a couple ways around this. I'm going to show you one because we don't want to get into the weeds here with how this is, but if you understand the concepts, we will copy files into temp and var temp, and then we will execute those, some tools that RackWare uses in order to be able to perform its operations. If no exec is set on temp or var temp, we copy the files, we can't execute them, RackWare can't perform its disaster recovery or its migration functions. So we have to think about what we want to do. If it's okay, we can simply remove the no exec from temp and var temp, if that's possible, or we have to give a different directory for RackWare to use, and we have to set a different option within the RackWare engine itself to use a different directory. But what you want to do is you simply want to let's just check and see what's going on. So let's just do this. We can run see what's going on with no exec. So we can do a mount. Uh, we'll pipe that to grep for no exec. Let's see what we got. So lots of no execs here, of course, right? So we can just look here. Are we looking? Do we see anything on temp or var temp? No, this is just all the standard stuff, but that's what you can take a quick look before RackWare runs. It'll throw an error message if you do it, if no exec is set. If it is set, it is most likely also set in the FS tab. So you'd want to go ahead and cat etc FS tab, I think here. So if you're going to do that, you would have a volume and it would say like no exec is set right here. So you could either comment that out, or we could go ahead and change the directory that RackWare is going to use. So it'd be something like that. Let's see what it says here. So we talked about our free extents. This is great, how to do that. Tar is a utility we do need also. Rocky Linux 8 by default, I think, doesn't have tar installed. Hey, let's just see. I think I installed it on this one, though. It's not going to work otherwise. Oh, look at that. Rocky Linux 8, tar command not found. So tar is another one. This is a little odd. I don't know why, but it seems to be only Rocky Linux 8 that doesn't have tar. So it says, okay, let's make sure. So we'll just do a DNF tar. All right, we'll install tar real quick on that one. So it talks about this, pretty straightforward here, antivirus here, and the no exec. So if you do need to use a non-default temporary directory, the link is here in the solutions. So you can just go ahead and look that up. We're not going to get into it, but basically it's a option on the RackWare engine that you say, go ahead and use like slash RackWare or something else. You could just make something up as long as it's not something that has a no exec set to it. And the RackWare engine will go ahead and use that. So if you don't have the ability to unmount the directories or set them to exec, we can use a different directory. We have a lot of options in there. But these are the keys. These are the ones that are kind of the things you want to look out for setting up these source Linux machines. So now we have our source Linux machine. We verified the SSH key. We verified there's no exec. I don't have any antivirus running, and we know we have free extents. So we are all good to go on that Linux machine. So now let's talk about Windows. So Windows, we have a couple things we want to look for in Windows. We want to go ahead and we want to make sure that we have enough free space on the disks in order to take a volume shadow copy. So I've got some commands we're going to play with here. And then we want to see if the ports are open. And then we want to go ahead and install the RackWare SSH client in order for it to create that SSH connection. So let's see here. Let me grab a Windows machine that I kind of got prepared. There we are. Let's bring this up. Okay, so I have a lot of things. But here is a Windows machine that jumped over there. Not happy. Okay. So here's Windows machine. I don't have anything on there, but the first thing I need to do is I need to go ahead and I'm just going to look and see if anything is listening on port 22 because the default port is 22. So I'll just do a netstat stat. Oh, sorry. Thinking of routing here. So netstat minus AN. And netstat minus AN, just go to the top because it goes in order. I'm not listening on port 22. Okay, so I'm listening on 445 and all these others, but I'm not listening on 22. That's great. There's no other application that's using port 22. That's kind of important to know because if it is, this isn't going to work. Okay, after that, I want to go ahead and I want to get the RackWare installer. I can check a few other things here. So I'll go ahead and get PowerShell. I'll take a look and see what my disk space is here, what volumes are allowed to take shadow copy snapshots. So get volume. Let's go here. We can do this. I think I did this the other day. Yep. So get volume. If we do get volume in PowerShell, it's telling me, hey, this is what I have for my volumes. This is what I have size remaining. I can see I have plenty of space left, 10% to take the volume shadow copies. Generally, you only have to think about this when your disks are starting to run up to 80% or so. But just make sure you have enough space for the volume shadow copies for each of the different volumes. So we need 10 to 15% space available on each of the volumes. And then we can take a look at our shadow storage. Let's see here, VSS admin list shadow storage. Probably have this command here. Sorry. Okay, nothing there. So we haven't taken any snapshots, nothing's there yet. So we can say, okay, that's great. And if we want to look and see if we have already have a bunch of snapshots in there, we can just do list shadows. This becomes helpful later when we're doing troubleshooting. So this is some of the troubleshooting items. If you get an error message while we're doing a synchronization and it says it can't create a shadow copy or there's not enough space and you need to troubleshoot your source host, these are probably the key commands you're going to use. You're going to say, well, do I have enough space to take a snapshot? Okay, do I already have, even if I have enough space, do I already have like 20 snapshots that didn't get deleted because I had some sort of backup utility on there and it left the snapshots laying around and I don't have any space? So these are those key commands that you're going to want to use to kind of troubleshoot these things. We'll check the volume. We'll see what our shadow storage looks like, and we'll go ahead and list the shadows. And then, of course, we can go beyond that with deleting shadow copies if we need to. So cleanup and stuff like that. So these are great. It's not really listed anywhere. They're just kind of useful Windows commands in order to troubleshoot migrations or disaster recovery or configuration for what we're doing. So netstat minus AN, we do not have anything listening on port 22. So first thing we want to do, since we do have Windows Defender running, is I've got to open up port 22. So we'll come over here, just look for firewall. And I am moving fast because we have a lot to cover here. So inbound rules, Windows Defender or other firewall, if it's running. I already have TCP/22 inbound rule, but it looks like this. I'll right click, new rule. It's an inbound rule. Okay. It's a port. It's port 22. I'm going to allow, and I'm going to apply it to all of these profiles, domain, private, and public, because this gets into another conversation. RackWare migrates or is providing disaster recovery on this Windows workload. Especially with migrations, quite often I see that we move them into a different subnet. They do not connect to a domain controller just yet. Maybe the domain controller is not there. We're just validating applications and things like that. So it doesn't connect to a domain. You need to make sure this firewall rule stays open even on the public profile because the RackWare engine will still need to connect to it. You don't want this OS to boot up and then block port 22 because it couldn't connect to a domain controller. So this is kind of in our gotchas and our things to think about that I'm going to go over in a few minutes. So make sure you apply this rule to all three profiles here. And you just give it a name, TCP, 22, in, or whatever you want to call it, and away you go. So we've got this rule here. It's going to allow ingress port 22. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and download the RackWare installer, the MSI installer, in order to allow the SSH connection. So you can get there's 64-bit and there's 32-bit. We're going to deal with 64-bit. This is the base URL. You're going to go to the IP address of your RackWare engine, and you can just download this file. So I've got that here already. We will grab it, go back to our Windows machine, And I use Chrome because Chrome will just go ahead and let you download it without trying to open it as a binary. Grab it, say yes. It's very small. It's like 22 megs or something like that. And then we'll come over here and got it downloaded. Right? Sorry, moving too fast. Okay, and it's in our download directory. Okay, so now we'll just run this. And of course, you can push this file in any way you want. You don't have to download it. You don't have to use a browser. You can copy the file and push it. You can do everything I'm showing you right now through group policy also. We have documents. So if you want to do 500 Windows machines, you can automate this, push everything out through GPO, everything we're doing, or unattended installation just as easily as what we're doing right now. So we're just going to run the RackWare application. It's very small. We're going to say yes. Okay. Go to next, agree, default location. Okay, this is what's critical right now. All right, so the username is going to stay this system, all capitals. The only time you're going to use something different is if you have a non-English language operating system. Then we have separate documentation. We're not going to get into that, where you would use a different user. But otherwise, if it's English-based Windows OS language pack, it's always going to be system because we want to go into the system account. We are not going to use a password. Port 22 is the default port. We can use a different port. If we change this here, we have to change this in the configuration we're going to use when we do our waves. So just remember that. If you have to use something else, you can use anything except for known ports or port 23. So I always do something like 2022, something like that. But we're going to use port 22. And then here it says that public key. So we got to go back and get our public key again. So let's grab that one. Remember that was on the RMM. And it was like right here. Remember that public key? It's the same key for everything, for all the source hosts. Actually, we better cat it again in case that's not quite. I resized everything there. Okay, cat that key. Come over here. Paste it. Next, next, next. All right, it's going to set up a process and everything like that. Okay, so now netstat minus an. Go back to the top, and we are now listening on port 22. So RackWare installed a service process that is now listening on port 22 for the connections, and it's good to go. So let's test this connectivity. So let's see here, IP config. Well, I don't do Windows too often. 172, 29, 41, 131. Okay, so let's see here. From the RackWare engine. Yeah, sorry. There we go. We're going to SSH into our Windows machine. System is that username, remember? At 172.29, was it 41, 131? Oh, and say yes. And there we go. That's how you test your connectivity to your source machines. We went ahead and we've got SSH into our source Windows machine, and we can execute commands and things like that. So we'll go ahead and exit. This looks good because we get the prompt and we know we're in our system at our host name of our source Windows machine. So that's how you validate that. That's how you set up the connectivity, everything like that. So if we take a look at some of the other important notes here, so we definitely want to use the correct installer, 64-bit or 32-bit. 32-bit's getting very difficult to support these days, unless you're moving into like a hypervisor like OLVM or something like that, or KVM, and then netstat, and then antivirus. Oh, very, very critical. Excuse me. So for Windows, the key things to think about are make sure we have enough space for volume shadow copies, RackWare installer, and antivirus. Antivirus just like Linux, but even more important for Windows, we've got to have the RackWare exclusions. It may complete, even if antivirus is running, it's going to slow everything down because the RackWare engine is going to read every file, copy every file, and an antivirus is going to basically add some number of milliseconds to every one of those operations. So a 45-minute operation that RackWare could sync could possibly take 7 hours or longer or more. It really adds, it's almost a 10x multiplier if you do not have the antivirus exclusions for some antiviruses. If you're running Windows Defender, in the document, it gives you all the PowerShell commands to add the exclusions. And I think this is probably the easiest way to look at it because some of them are processes and some of them are paths. So these are the processes that you're going to exclude or whitelist, and these are the paths that you're going to whitelist or exclude for your antivirus software. And that's what you want to look at. And if we go here, if we go to our document and we get into the Windows part, so this talks about everything we just did: volume, shadow copy services and partitions, configuring the SSH admin user here. If we're doing something else, but we're not, you may have to add login as a service for your security policy here. It depends on what your security rules are for Windows, but that is one thing. It doesn't come up too often, but sometimes it does. You have to allow logon as a service. So basically go through these Windows installer here, instructions, talks about downloading the MSI package, installing the MSI package, goes through everything we just did, but it then gets into the antivirus settings. So you can find all of these PowerShell commands here in the same documentation, and it gives you paths and everything like that. So here it even talks about non-interactive installation, and if you want to do it through group policy, we can send you the documents on that. Support can do that. But here's where it gets the antivirus exclusions, and here's where you can find all those commands for PowerShell and everything like that. So these are just the key to setting up the Windows and Linux. These are the ones, it's the initial setup that I think can take a little longer sometimes if you don't understand what RackWare needs to do. And the key is that we need to be able to connect in to the source host via SSH without being prompted for a password. And so let's see what else we have in here. So I'm going to go back here. Yep. Here's some of the things to think about, the things that I see come up in the field often that are specific to Windows, not really documented anywhere. But what are you going to do about Active Directory? Let's say we're migrating this source from my VMware environment, and I'm going to move it over to OVM or somewhere else, and my target doesn't have connectivity to AD quite yet. What's going to happen? Or I don't want my target to, it's going to come online with the same host name and the same SID. I don't want it to connect to my Active Directory server and bump my source machine off because I'm not doing my cutover. I'm just doing a synchronization, or I'm seeding the target. So you do want to block the target network communication to the production AD server, because you'll have two hosts with the same host name connecting to the same AD server. The second one is probably going to bump the production machine off of AD, and nobody's going to be happy about that. So just think about what's going to happen with Active Directory. You can, of course, create a target AD server. It doesn't have to be the most up-to-date, and we will point the new target hosts to the new AD server. That's what most people do. This way, it can come online. It can log in with a domain, but it's not connecting back to the production or the source AD server. And then I was talking earlier about the accounts or access over port 22. So if you don't have an AD server and you're not connecting to one quite yet, you haven't created one yet, and you want to RDP into these machines after they're migrated, what do you need to think about in order to do that? I can't RDP into it using my domain account because I'm not connected to a domain server. So if you have a local admin account on there, that's what you want to use, and make sure that you have RDP privileges for that local admin account. So just think about how will I RDP into this migrated machine if it's not connected to a domain controller, if that's what's happening. These are the two gotchas right there. So this one especially. Can RackWare still connect to it? The answer is yes, because RackWare will be able to connect to it via SSH. So, if you migrated this and you didn't have a local account, you could actually create a local account via over SSH by logging into it with the RackWare engine and creating a local account and everything like that, because the RackWare engine still has that system level access to the target until you remove the RackWare software. So these are a lot of things here in a lot of detail that it's in the prereq guide, but it kind of gets glossed over quite a bit. But it's the things you really want to think about. Okay, now we have two main interfaces to that RackWare engine itself. There's what's called the RWADM and the RWCLI, or the command line interface. And they're two distinct modules that do different things. The RWADM, or admin console, does admin level things. So let's bring one up here. Let's get back to our RackWare engine. Okay, so we're in our source machine. Okay, so RWADM help. Cool. So these are things that you're going to use to start and stop services, reinitialize the RackWare engine itself, force stop, and also do things such as control your storage, the storage that the RackWare engine would use for disaster recovery. We don't need additional storage for migrations, but we do need storage for disaster recovery. So this is the command structure that you would use for that, and like applying licenses and things of that nature. You won't use it very often, but we can look at something like RWADM status all, and that tells me all my processes are running. I could stop my services here. If I wanted to do an OS update, I could do that. We say if you're going to update the actual operating system security patches, we would have you pause any syncs that were running and or disaster recovery policies. Go ahead and stop the RackWare process, run all the security updates, reboot it. It'll come back. It's just fine. So you can have the patching in your standard patching procedure, but the best way to do it is to stop the process. So use this RWADM command to do that. The other thing we want to do, since we're talking about storage, is we will take a look at our current storage pool, because I want to set up some disaster recovery for you. So storage pool, we will take a look at the RWCLI pool show. And so this will tell us our current storage pool. So I have 162 gigs available, what is logically allocated, and the actual total size here of my pool, or sorry, 5.45 megs allocated on that one. So this is, I have a storage pool I set up when I built my RackWare engine, but now I need more space. I've been doing something, I need to have more space. How do I add space or figure out how much space I need for my disaster recovery environment? I want to protect some number of hosts. Rule of thumb is, if you will go by the amount of used data that the source hosts have. So something along these lines. I have 10 hosts, and they each have 100 gigs of used data, not disk size. This is just used data itself, data that's actually on the disks. The disks could be multi-terabytes, doesn't really matter. So I got 1,000 gigs of data I want to protect, right? So your RackWare storage pool, or the block storage disks, as a starting point, we say, go ahead and give it the same amount of size as all of the used data across all the hosts you want to protect. Now, it's just a general number. It generally doesn't need to be this big. You can go about 75% as a starting point because you can always add space later. So that's what I'm showing you right now is like, I have some space. I need more space. I know I need more space because I have 250 gigs worth of used data. So I definitely going to need half is not going to be enough. And I might need more space to be able to take more snapshots, which we're going to talk about. So how do I add more space to my storage pool? That's the key right there. So what we need to do is we need to give that RackWare engine an additional disk or block storage. And of course, this looks the same no matter whether it's in the cloud or on-prem. So here is my RackWare engine. So I'll just add another disk, right, real easily. So we'll edit this guy, go ahead and say add a new device, hard disk. We'll make it 50 gigs real quick. All right, just do that thin, and there we go. Okay, so we added a disk to my RackWare engine. You can start out smaller. So let's say I needed to protect 3 TB of data. I might start out with a 2 TB disk to start out with. And maybe later I can add another terabyte and another terabyte and another terabyte because the RackWare engine is going to pull them all together. So it looks like this, right? Cool. There's our new disk. So dev SDA is my system. Dev SDB is my current storage pool. And dev SDC is the disk I just added that's not doing anything yet. So the command I want to use is rwadm, so the rwadmin command, ZFS configure. All right, so we'll let it run through there. And yep, it's default. And it says, okay, I have a pool right now. I got 168 gigs. Do you want to add an extra disk to the pool? Yes, I do, because I want more space. It says, okay, I only see one disk that is free right now because the rest of them are already in use. So I'll say, okay, well, I'm going to add a disk and I'm going to give it the path and say, well, this is the path to the free disk, dev SDC. All right, and I'm going to say, yes, thank you, add the disk. Oh, sorry, so I meant to hit finished. Oh, that's what prime. We're going to do, oh, there we go. All right, hold on a second. Finished. All right, let's see if it even got there because I kind of see here. RW, pull, show. Yep, so there we go. So should have hit finish, not add another disk, of course, but now we can see that that 50 gigs was added to my storage pool. And there are commands that you can use later. Let's say you no longer need as much storage. We can actually remove disks. It takes a few other commands to do that, but it can be done. So you can always start out in groups. I'd say, hey, 1 to 5 terabyte size disks, add them to the pool so you have, and you can remove them later if you want to. So you don't have to do it all at once because we'll be able to check the pull command to see how much we're using because we don't know what the compression ratio is going to be until we actually capture a couple hosts and see where we're at and get those metrics. So this is something that's in there. You'll use RW pull show and you'll use the RWADM command to get that information here. So we can do the status all, the ZFS configure, and then the RWCLI, if we have time, we're going to get into that, but that does everything. So that's the full command line infrastructure underneath the RackWare engine that the GUI actually accesses to perform the functions we're going to do in the graphical interface. So we can get to it. We can look at everything that's available. All right, so we're clear. And we have a whole separate document on this. If you really want to get into it, I can dig that up for you. It's RWCLI help, and we can pipe that to less just to see what commands are available, right? And it just goes on and on and on. These are like all the possible commands. And so one of the commands here is host discover. Get out of that. So we would do something like this: RWCLI host discover dash dash help, you pipe that to less. So you can look at each individual command and you can get the command structure from those. So we can take a look at host discover, wave edit, host modify. These are all the typical commands you might use um, if you were to perform the functions in the command line. And sometimes some troubleshooting diagnostics you will use some command line operations in order to get more granular if you have some failures, and it'll kind of present that information. But you should just be familiar with that it's there, how to use it, and how to access the help file, and that's how you do it. Another one that's very useful is RWCLI, RMM show. This is going to tell us everything about that RackWare engine. It's going to say what version are we running when it was installed. It's going to tell us what the operational statistics are and what our license status looks like. So it's all displayed in the GUI, but when you request license keys and things like that, the support group is going to ask you for this output almost every single time. So be familiar with it. That's the command you're going to use, and it's going to give you the output. So we have the RWADM, which is for admin level commands, and the CLI, which is everything else, even with logs and things like that. So we can take a look at RWCLI job query. That's one of my favorites. What has happened? So RWCLI job query, oh, that's a great one. I use this for almost everything. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put this in the chat for you. Let's see here, hosts and panelists, it should be it. That's one of my favorites right there, because that tells you every job that happened, and then it gives you the job ID, and it gives you the path to the verbose log, which we're going to talk about when we do some troubleshooting in a minute. But this is like the key. I can find out what I've already done and what the verbose path is. Okay. So now we got to get into storage and snapshot. We already did that. So we talked about adding a second disk, adding additional storage for the ZFS, and then we can look at the host and everything like that. So let's get into the last pieces of this presentation. We will go ahead and let me bring up a RackWare engine. All right, so I want to go ahead and I want to capture a couple hosts. So I will come over here to the host tab, and I'll say I need to add some source machines that I want RackWare to do something with. So I'll go to source. And right here, I can add them one at a time. I can say, okay, here's just a single host. I can say, yeah, this is my source host and its IP address, like that. And it's a Windows or it's a Linux machine, and it's got port information, everything like that. And that's all great. When you're doing one or two at a time, it all flows, it makes sense. But if you're going to do 10 or 20 or 100, it's easier to do this through a CSV file. So I'll say, okay, come over here to my templates, and what is my target environment? So all the major environments are kind of here. It just helps you with some of the headers, and I'm going to show you what that is. But my target environment is OLVM for today. I'm using OLVM as my target environment. So I'll say, yep, download that template for me. And so it gives us this template CSV file that I'm going to go ahead and enter things into. And so if I look at it right here, it's got the headers. It just doesn't have any data. So origin name, origin IP, username, password, things like that. So it's got this big list of headers that all relate to OLVM specifically for target information. So let me show you one that I created. Right. Let's get the files here with some data on some hosts that I already set up. So here's the same template, but I filled some of the information in. And it may look a little intimidating, but it's not. It's as soon as you've done one or two, it's very easy. So the name is just the name of my source host, the IP of my source host, the username or account that I used, right? So remember we created that RackWare user, and if it was Windows, it would be system. As a matter of fact, let's see if we can grab what was our Windows machine again. We'll add it to my list here. Let's see. Put it on there. Windows. Okay. 170, 2040, 131. Get that right? 131? Yeah. Okay. Great. So what was it called? It was called AST-DB01. Okay. AST-DB01. I like to put SRC. So um, I will change the source host name and I'll put -SRC to almost everything um, because I want to differentiate that from my target machine. And whatever you put here for the target name is the name of the virtual machine that gets created in your target environment. So I don't want to say I can't have the same name in both places. So I will put -source if I'm doing migrations, or if I'm doing something else, I'll just put a different target name on here. So we'll just call this one AST DB01 DR for now. Okay, remember, and this one is Windows. Okay, SSH only. This is a setting you have to set for Windows. It's true. And then let's look at the rest of it here. So we got Windows. My auto provision type, I want these to be dynamically provisioned because I'm doing disaster recovery. I just want them created at a disaster or at a test or an actual failover event. So I'll put dynamic. The options here are, let's see here, I have them in the, there we go. Yep. So our header options for target type are dynamic, pre for pre-provisioned, and FDP for fast dynamic provisioning. We're not going to talk about that right now. Just dynamic and pre-provisioned are what we're looking at. Pre-provisioned means create the target host for me right away. Dynamic means create it only when I have a failover event itself. And then our sync types are direct, stage 1, and stage 1 and stage 2. Direct is for migrations. Stage 1 is to capture the host. Stage 1 and stage 2 is to both capture it and create the second host. So we're going to say, we're just going to do stage 1 because we're talking about storage. All right. And then I am going to give it my OOVM information. So since I'm going to deploy this to my OOVM environment, I give it the cluster and the data store name. All right. And I think there's one more here. I think I need, yep, a VNIC profile. What network do I want to connect it to? So let's add that on there. All right, so that's it. There's more. Oh, I can do tagging. This is new. This is great. So we're going to put some tags on here. Okay, we're just going to have one tag. Tagging is great. And this is when we start talking about like 500 machines or hundreds and hundreds or thousands of machines. We can create a single CSV file, but we can tag what wave we want to put them in, and even multiple tags. Like I can have not only a wave tag, but I can have a host tag and say, you know, multiple tags. This becomes very easy when we start to create wave files or workflows. Put a tag on there. I want all these to happen in wave 1. This is going to happen in wave 2, and this is going to be in wave 3. So I can put these tags on here. We'll save this real quick. All right. And then, so here, sync type, host tagging looks like this. If you want multiple tags, you just put multiple columns and then put a new tag on each column. So it'll have both these tags. So that's just something you'll do if you need a host to have multiple tags. And then we'll go ahead and we'll create these hosts. Let me grab this. Okay, so we have our source hosts. We want to discover these. So we'll take that CSV file and we'll just drag and drop it right here. And we'll say next. And it'll validate the file. And here's our tags. So here's all of our hosts that we want RackWare to discover that we're going to do something with. And these are the tags that get applied. So these is kind of a really high level of waves and what you can do, like advanced wave headers. So there's a lot of different headers. There's a lot of different things you can do, like so many options. You can do everything in the GUI, but you can also do everything in a single CSV file. So you will find in the link that I sent everybody earlier a document called Wave Headers. So these are what all the headers can be in the CSV file and everything. And there's a lot of them. So you do ones that are specific to what you need if you want to pre-create your entire workflow using a CSV file. You won't know what these are exactly, specifically for all the environments, unless you've done this quite a bit. But there'll be a document coming out that's going to help with this in a little while. But this is what you can use for all of your CSV file creation for the new 7.7 build that's just went GA recently that you're kind of getting a look at right now. So this will be useful. Let's see here. What else do I want to show you today? Okay, so this is going to run through the bulk discover. So we added our source host list here, and they're already discovered. So now I have all of these source machines that RackWare discovered. So this is how assessment works at a high level. And it says, okay, I can go to each of these source machines and I can see what they are. It says, okay, this is the IP address. This is Rocky Linux 8.10. It went and discovered it. And it even tells us how much disk space it uses and what the volume layout is. And then if we let this run for a little while, it would go ahead and enable analysis, and it would do dependency mapping, and it would tell us what it's interconnected with. And we can see, oh yeah, this thing's running, hardware address, everything like that. This is the partition layout. This is my LVM volume and everything like that. And I automatically went and tagged this because the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to create a capture wave. I want to capture these hosts to storage because I want to go ahead and set up a disaster recovery policy. So I'm going to capture these to storage because today's training has a lot to do about storage and file systems, things like that with the RackWare engine. So I'll come over here to waves and I'll say, I will create a wave and we'll just call this capture. And I'll say, you know what? I could have 500 or 1,000 hosts in here that I discovered. So I'll just go ahead and say, I want all the hosts from wave 01, and it will automatically choose those. Or I can sit there and pick and choose my hosts from my list. You know, I have 3 or 4, it's no big deal, 5 or 10. But if I have 500, I want to have split these out already, or I could choose by app01 or something like that. But I want to do these. I'm going to say, oh, I just want these hosts. I'm going to add these to this capture command, which we said was stage 1. I'm going to come over here, and the parallel count is 50, so it's going to do both of these at the same time. So I'll just go ahead and capture these, get these started, and we're going to have just enough time to show you retention policies here because this takes about 6 minutes to capture these hosts. So what's happening in the background is part of the disaster recovery workflow. Let's see here. There we go. Okay. The RackWare engine connects into these source hosts, runs queries using the software that's installed on the OS, get the metadata about the host, brings that information into the RackWare engine itself and holds that. Then it initiates the capture command where it tells it to take an LVM snapshot or the SS shadow copy snapshot, because that's what we set up, made sure we had available for the Windows and Linux machines. It then copies the data from the mounted snapshots to the RackWare storage. So that's that RackWare pool that we had with the RW pool show. That's the block storage that we're using as a container to hold all of the used data from each of the hosts we want to protect. So we gave RackWare the block storage, and this is where we're going to copy that data to that block storage here. And so it's going to create these RackWare images, and each one of these images is representative of each of the hosts that we're protecting in storage. And so if we're doing disaster recovery, of course, you would deploy the RackWare engine to your disaster recovery site because you always want to keep your data in your disaster recovery site in case the source environment goes offline, whether it's network or natural disaster or what have you. If your source environment goes offline, there's always a good copy of your data over here in the RackWare engine itself. So I'm keeping this. And next thing I want to do while the data is syncing, we have a couple minutes, is I want to come over here and I want to set up my backup and my retention policy or my snapshot schedule against these images. So what I will do is I'll come over here. I'll create a backup and retention policy. All right. Okay. And we'll call this backup hourly 01. All right. And I'll set the intervals. So I'll say this is going to be every hour. I want RackWare to take a snapshot of the image. And I want you to keep 24 individual hourly snapshots. And then I want it to keep a daily snapshot. And I want it to keep 60 individual daily snapshots. So this is the part we can't really give you hard numbers for as far as storage goes, because we don't know how many snapshots you want to take. The rule of thumb number of same size block storage device as used data typically applies for about 24 hourly and 30 daily snapshots, because this allows you to go back in time and redeploy from any of these points in time, whether restoring individual files or restoring actual entire hosts using the migration engine. But we're going to look, and I'm going to show you some of the tricks in a second of what that looks like. We have just enough minutes, but I'll create this retention policy. And then after I create the retention policy, we have to wait for the images to be finished, but I will add my 2 images that we just started syncing. And then I will create a policy that tells it when to sync. So I'll create a DR policy. I'll say this. I'll set a schedule where I have an RPO of 30 minutes, say by frequency, 30 minutes, and I'll create that. All right. So we need 2 pieces here. We need an RPO policy that tells RackWare to sync these hosts every 30 minutes or hour or 2 hours or what have you, so we get the changes. And so after we create the policy, go ahead and add our hosts. All right. These 2 guys right there. Perfect. So my 2 hosts now have a policy, a schedule that says sync them every 30 minutes from source to storage. I initiate that. I go ahead and say, turn this on. And I've created my retention policy that says every hour, I want you to take a snapshot and keep that snapshot for 24 hours, individual ones, and the daily snapshots. Now I have actually protected those 2 source hosts that are within that DR policy itself. We got to wait a couple minutes for things to happen because it's still probably syncing. I think we got to wait for this to complete. Yep. So 3-4 more minutes. That one's finished. I think this guy's going to take 2 more minutes and everything like that. And I can show you what the restore file looks like. I know we covered a lot there. We've only got a couple minutes left, so I'm going to dig down a little bit deeper real quick into some troubleshooting, what you want to look for. So if we want to see what's happening at any point in time, we can go ahead and expand a host line item, and you can take a look here at the status, and we can see within the status itself, sorry, we did a refresh here. All right, this is what we care about. So this is the friendly log. This is the one that's going to tell you if something failed. It will give you some information here, but this friendly log says, hey, what did I do? What's included in the capture? It tells you all of the basic information. And if there was a failure, this is where it would tell you the failure is, and it would give you some simple information on what to look for. But it also gives you this file path. And the file path, sorry, my refresh rate is set to 15 seconds. We've changed that right here. This is the refresh rate for that. You can grab this file path and you can go to your RackWare engine. All right. Sorry, grab that. And you can do a less on that log, and we can see everything that RackWare did. So if you were to open up a support ticket, this is what they're going to want. So you can download this file and you can attach it to your support ticket. You simply just go in there, look at the job itself, grab the verbose log and send it to the support guys, and they're going to be able to answer your question a lot better than anything else because just looking at the GUI just gives us some basic information. But the key to support and looking up what's actually going on is to get that verbose log right there. And what is really great is if you notice this path, var log rackware by job ID, and then some number. If I look at, okay, R, RWCLI job query, right? I can say, oh, this is my last job that just completed. And it will tell me what the path is to that verbose log. So you can do everything in the command line also. So I can then go here, I can do it. I can do a less on var log rackware by job ID. And then I can kind of grab this path and I can put it there, hit tab, complete. So there's the log. So that's that log file. So if I wanted to look at all the jobs that I did, whether they completed, whether they were success or most likely failures, um, I can simply just go and use that. And then I can find the actual path. I don't even have to use the GUI. This makes a big difference if you're like syncing hundreds of machines. It can be a little bit faster to kind of jump in here real quick. And then I can look at this path and I can look at my verbose log, or I can SCP it or download it or whatever I want to do and give it to the support guys. So that I find that to be very helpful and make things go quite a bit faster when you're trying to figure out what's wrong. Let me make sure I covered everything here because we only got a couple minutes left. Um, and yeah, there's a question here about the OOVM. Absolutely. If you're doing disaster recovery OOVM to OOVM, yeah, it's the same workflow. What we do is we didn't get the chance to actually deploy to OOVM, but you'll notice when we created that WAV file, I set the auto provisioning information here. Let's see here. I'll set it to my cloud user. This is my OOVM environment that I've already set up. And my provisioning configuration here, I would go ahead and say, oh, yep, it's OOVM. And this is where I'd give it the cluster, the storage domain, and the VNIC profile, and all that information specifically for OOVM, CPU, memory count, things like that. I can set up multiple NICs, everything. So that's what's kind of supported. So if you're doing DR OOVM to OOVM, or VMware to OOVM, or what have you, or any of the others, this is what it's going to look like. And that's kind of a separate full disaster recovery training session we're going to do. This is more focused around the storage part. But yeah, absolutely. It's any to any. You want to go AWS to OOVM, we can do that. OOVM to OOVM or what have you. So that is what I had. Let's make sure we covered all the topics real quick here. So
Yeah,
we had,
David, there is an outstanding question in the Q&A from Justin about the node management feature and controlling multiple RMMs.
oh yeah. So that one I know of that feature. That I will have to get back to you on that, Justin. Maybe you can, Jonathan, you can take that one offline because it's a newer feature. But yes, so you will see something here now where we have a single RackWare engine, and it can be like the main pane of glass and can run other RackWare engines, so you can increase your parallel count of syncs and you kind of offload the work from those. So I have not used it yet, so I couldn't tell you much about it, but I can find out and know when all of that feature is completely available. You can add nodes now. Basically, you build additional RackWare engines and you add them to this one here by their IP address. You've already set up the SSH keys. I know that much. And then you'll be able to see all the sources and all the targets and everything from like the main node manager itself. But that's what I understand.
So, Justin, I have your email address here. We will be sure and have someone reach out to you shortly with more of an answer on that.
Yep. Yeah, that's a key one, especially if you're trying to protect like, 300 machines. You can do that with the one management node. But yeah, that's what I had for everybody. This was really supposed to get into storage and some advanced stuff and where to find some of the tooling we had. I hope you found this helpful. We will have some additional follow-up sessions specific to, how to use this new 772. And as a matter of fact, I will add node management to that when we do that.
Is that it, David? We good?
We are good. If there's no other questions, we'll probably close this out in about 30 seconds. If you didn't get your question answered, please feel free to send an email to info@rackwareinc.com. We will definitely get back to you. Um, there we go. Sorry, there we are. Or sales@rackwareinc.com if you have sales questions. And thanks for your time, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.